What's up, guys? Let's take a look at another CodeWars exercise. This one's called Pete the Baker, and the story is pretty realistic. We've got a recipe with ingredients and amounts, and then we've got our inventory from the pantry or the fridge, also with ingredients and amounts. And the question is, how many times can we make the recipe? This is like the idea of limiting factor in chemistry, where you've got some molecules, they have a reaction, and eventually one of them's going to run out. Even if you have leftovers of the other, they can't do it without all the parts of the equation, so they're done. In this case, we need 1 egg and we have 5, so we could do that 5 times. We need 200 sugar and we have 12, so we could do that 6 times. And we need 500 flour and we only have 12, so we can only do that 2 times. We don't do any half portions or anything like that, so we return 2. You run out of flour, you can't make cake. Now in this one, we have 0 because all the stuff we need, not all of it appears in the stuff we have. So it's not even that the number's too small, it's that there is no number at all. We try to look up how much oil, and there's no oil at all. So before we even try to do the math, we have to see if the numbers exist in the first place. Why don't we put that first in our code to keep it simple and easy? Let's say I'm going to look through the ingredients. If there's one that's not in there, well, then we're done. So for ingredient and amount, I'll go ahead and bring the amounts along too because we'll use them next. In recipe.items is what you call to get both sides of a dictionary. And we can say if ingredient is not available, well then that's it, we're done. We return false. We can't do it. And then now we have to actually do the math. So I'm looking for the minimum, right? Like we could have done 5 times the egg thing, we could have done 6 times the sugar thing, but then the flour, when we got to that example, we could only do 2. So we're looking for the minimum, which means I'm going to put them in a list. That's not the only way to do it, but it's a good way to use the minimum function. So I'm going to put them in a list and say on each one I'm going to go servings dot append, so the available of that ingredient divided by the amount. So this is like the 1200 divided by 500 thing. Wait for the bell. We use the double slash for integer division. I think it's called floor division in this case, to round it down so we don't care about any remainder. And in that case, we're done. We can just say return min of servings. I think that would pass all the tests. And we could move on, but I think I have a way to write this a lot nicer and shorter. For one, whenever we have a list and we append to it along the way, that's a good opportunity to look for a comprehension instead. You don't really need all those 3 steps of like starting blank, going through a loop, adding. You can usually do it in one, and you can just put it inside of the min or the max or the sum or whatever we're using in this particular exercise. And also, whenever we're checking if something is in a dictionary or not, we've seen that recently quite a few times, and we can use the .get method to specify a default. So basically, we can cut all of these lines, or at least move this part to another part, so that the whole thing becomes shorter and more straightforward, where we say the thing that matters first, and then we say how and when it happens, right? What's the thing that matters is this. This is the engine of the problem. We're dividing the available by the amount. Like, that's key to everyone, so let's put that first in here. And then how does it happen? It happens based on the ingredients and the amounts in the recipe. So, boop. And then we're done. We can cut all the rest, and the only thing that stops this from working, which is you look up, you divide, you go through the whole thing, the only thing that stops this from working is you might not find it at all. Like that first example, or the second one in the directions had oil required, and there was no oil at all. So we have to use the .get method to specify a default. In that case, we'll just have 0, because if the minimum is 0, well then that means the others don't really matter. We say no. I said false earlier, but false and 0 are the same thing, so no problem. So now if I run this, it's good, and if I hit attempt for the bigger tests, it's still good. I don't like it because this line is stretching too far out, so let's space something like that. I think that's really nice. We say, what do we do for 1, and then how do we stretch it across the whole data, and then we're done. That looks good to me. Let's see what other people have tried. Well, guess what? I thought I was special for coming up with that expression, but no, it's pretty common. Everybody's doing the same thing. This person is doing exactly the same thing we did, just with a different name. I guess they're thinking K is like key in a dictionary, but K is pretty bad. It doesn't really specify what we're talking about here. Now, obviously, it's shorter to type K than to type ingredient, but it's harder to read. Now, in this case, this person must not have known about the get method, so they're using try except instead. If you try to look something up and you don't find it, you would get a key error, and then they would return 0. This person found another way to avoid the zeros, which is you just put a little if in there. If I isn't available, otherwise we return 0. Great. And this person did the list append method, kind of like our first draft. I don't really like it. It's not my style to have a couple lines of setup before you get to the real stuff. I like to put the core engine of it right front and center. It feels more readable to me. Now, of course, you don't get there on the first try. It's fine to write this as a first draft, and it totally works as a second too. I just have different tastes. This one, I think the iter items is a Python 2 thing. In Python 3, we don't need that anymore, so I wouldn't recommend copying this person. And if we scroll, we'll probably see the same stuff in general. Nothing too wild unless, yeah, I'm not really seeing much else. If we scroll long enough, we'll see one that would surprise us. But the point of this one, oh, this person just really crammed it into a small character count. The point of this one was how we recognize these patterns. We've seen the idea of appending to a list, and we realize you can rearrange it to a comprehension expression. And we've seen the idea of looking for things in a dictionary, and you can rearrange it to the get method to specify a default and do it all in one confident step instead of, well, if this, having to go through different exceptions. Thanks.